sure you'll agree that music is such a powerful language, the language of being able to express yourself, to express and communicate feelings and emotions through sound. It's such a joy to be able to communicate how you're feeling with others, or to learn a piece of music and to work out what that composer was trying to communicate, what they were trying to capture, that emotion and that feeling. Hey everybody, I'm Rachel Hardman, and in today's episode on Passionate About Music Education, I'm going to talk to you about communication. And I'm sure, like myself, there are many times where you have got it completely wrong, whether it's communicating with a colleague or communicating with a family member or communicating with friends, or even sometimes communicating with the students in our classroom, or even understanding the music that we're playing and communicating the correct feelings. It's very normal for us to get this wrong because, let's be honest, how many times have you had lessons on communication? And it's such an important life skill that we just don't get taught. So we tend to model it on what we see around us, what we've seen on television, what we've seen from our family and friends and from our colleagues and our superiors. And often this is rooted in a very demand relationship style. So it's like, I'm communicating, I need you to do this, and I need you to do this by this time. And most of us, of course, will respond to that positively and meet those deadlines, even though we might grumble away. But actually, we need to start encouraging more of a development growth and more of the communication that is inclusive, that has empathy, that allows people to be vulnerable, allows people to talk about their feelings and emotions in a safe environment, so that we all understand, because this is where communication breaks down. And I'm sure you've experienced points in your life where communication has broken down and it's led to confusion that was completely unnecessary had communication been more open, more honest and more inclusive. We've all been there and we've all made that mistake too. So how can we ensure that communication, not only of musical sound, but also those skills are there for our students? Because music has the power to communicate and express emotions. So one of the ways that I like to encourage students to communicate is in group composition tasks. And when they're working, particularly at middle school, in groups, the first stage of any topic, any composition task that I set them, is always about planning. And I really find that students struggle with this aspect. They just want to charge and grab every instrument, grab the bongo drums, and they're sorted. And then of course what happens is they just sit in their group of four, nobody communicating with each other, banging a bongo drum, playing on a keyboard. Then they get frustrated and annoyed at each other and then start shouting at each other, and then that's when you step in and go, what's going on? And we all know that. So in my lessons, I use the 3 Ps: plan, practice and perform. Because really they do need to have some kind of idea, because asking them to start from scratch, and that needs them to communicate. So I'll give them 5-10 minutes, depending on how long my lesson is, to plan. And I won't let them get the instruments, because I say in this session, in this beginning stage, you need to talk about who's playing what, who's going to be the team leader, how are you going to start your music, how are you going to end your music, are you all going to play at the same time, are you all going to play the same instrument all the way through your composition. And some groups pick this up really quickly and they plan and they talk and they come to you and, yeah, we've talked about it, we've got these ideas, and that's great. And other groups are much slower at this because they're not used to doing this communication. They're very much used to being in a classroom where the teacher will explain what they're doing, say, this is what I expect you to do, go do it. And the students go, yes, okay, that's what I'm being told to do. And if I don't follow what I'm being told to do, the chances are I'll get told off. So in our subject area, we're actually trying to get them to think for themselves, because there's nothing worse than a student coming through school all the way through where they're not thinking for themselves and developing their own character and their own identity. But that's really important for us to help students do this. Another way that I like to get students to think for themselves and learn the communication skills is for them to communicate with each other. And one way is, of course, if you have students on lesson instrumental rotas. And what I always say to my students is, if your time clashes, or you're in an exam, or you have a test, or a particular teacher who's not so kind at letting you out of the classroom, then find somebody else on that rota on that day to swap. You can see them, you can email them, you can go and find them in their advisory group. And if you struggle and can't do that, and you can't find somebody, then of course come to me and I will fix it. And it's not because I don't want to help them. Of course I'd help them. And if they come to me and go, oh, I can't do it, of course, because I wouldn't want them to miss their lesson. But really what I want the students to do, and I'm a real big advocate for this, is to be brave and to communicate with others, to start to learn to ask, to solve their own problems. If I fix every problem for them, what help am I really giving those students? Yes, I'm giving the immediate, instant fix, but I'm not teaching them life skills. And I think as I've been teaching for a long time, I see more and more students really struggling to think for themselves, to actually have the confidence to go and talk to others. And it's our job to help them learn to communicate, because we know how important it is going into life. I mean, there's all different ways that you and I have to communicate, but also you understand, like I do, the pain when the communication is wrong, the misunderstanding, and how that can have such a negative impact on our day, our feelings, our emotions, our self-worth. Another way I like to encourage communication is I don't always ask the students to put their hands up, so I will randomly pick students to communicate, and I will give them the time to think and process. Particularly if you're conscious of embarrassing students, which is, not anything that we ever want to do, but sometimes you ask a question and a student really can't give you the answer immediately. And of course, there's always 4 kids who are like, I know. You're like, stop, give them a minute to think. It's okay for them to take that process time. And then you generally find that students come up with the answers. But I like to try and make sure that I'm asking questions of everybody in the room, which isn't always easy to do, because you'll always have those students who are super keen and have their hands up, and of course you want to encourage them too. But rotating communication is really important, whether you're doing it at the beginning of the lesson, or even if you're doing it at the end as a recap. What did you learn today? What did you improve? What would you do next lesson? And the other way, of course, because we're musicians, is to communicate how we feel inside outwards using instruments, and that can be really daunting for the non-specialist music student, the student who's not having clarinet lessons or piano lessons, and they're using classroom percussion or keyboards. And we want to encourage them to communicate how they're feeling inside through those instruments. And I'm really keen on children performing and then finding positive, and then we talk about ways they can improve but not negative, and it's not personal. We talk about all of this in classrooms. Really need to keep a safe classroom. And one of the ways I had an experience a few months ago where some students were very, very nervous, and this is why communicating and keeping your classroom is safe is so important. So I had these students come into the classroom, and they were very shy girls. And the students in the classroom began given a chance to perform their work in progress. They were all learning solos, and they got a chance to perform. And the class has teaching assistants, and the teaching assistants, without realising what they were doing, were very much demanding, come on girls, you need to play. I know you've been practicing, you need to play in front of the class. And of course, as a musician, you know that is not a helpful way of communicating or developing their confidence. So of course you have to step in at times as the adult and rather than demand that the teachers change their opinion, say, it's okay girls, I know that you've been practicing, I can see that, I know that you've been working really hard. If you want to show me with headphones on, that's great. If you want to keep it to yourself for now, that's fine. And because I created that safe environment, I took that demand relationship out, and it was all about relationship development. It's all about, actually I want my students to grow in confidence to communicate how they feel, and that can't always be on that 50-minute lesson agenda. Sometimes for some students it just takes longer, and that is perfectly fine, and I'm happy for that. 2-3 weeks later, when we did the task again, those girls performed, because I had given them the space to feel that they could communicate safely. And that's really important for us to do. Let's talk about some action steps you can put into your practice or reinforce in your practice that will help students develop the confidence to communicate both verbally with you, with each other, and of course musically. So action point 1, really encourage relationship development, really encourage students to grow. Rather than us give them the answers all the time, get them to think for themselves, process it, because they generally know the answer, and we just have to create that environment where they feel that they are safe to communicate. Action point 2, mix up the groups. If you're teaching middle school or even high school, don't let them always work with their best friend, because they will know how to communicate with their best friend, but they don't necessarily know how to communicate with everybody. You and I both know that we have to work with people all day that are not necessarily our best friends, and we have to learn ways to communicate effectively, and that's a difficult skill. So I'm always encouraging students to work in different groups and talk about the fact that they need this as a real life skill for going forward, that when they're going to work, when they are out and about in real life, that they will have to communicate with people who aren't their best friends. So music gives them that chance to learn those skills. Action point 3, give space in your curriculum for growth in communication, both practically and verbally. We want students to take time to plan their work and talk and communicate their ideas, so that they then know what they're doing next, rather than just randomly getting instruments and composition and hoping for the best. And also in terms of being able to express themselves musically and communicate those different feelings and talk about why music's so powerful and the feelings it can create. There's a whole spectrum of feelings and emotions, and we need our students to be brave to try and experiment with all of them. And my final action step for today is try as best as you can to create a safe environment for your students to communicate. Those questions sometimes when they ask, which you go, why have they asked that? It's safe. We need to create an environment that's safe to ask those questions. There's no stupid questions. They just need confidence, and they need sometimes to hear that 2 or 3 times. So creating safe spaces where they can communicate their ideas. I'm always helping students learn how to communicate more effectively. So when we do group performance work or solo performance work, I often ask the class to give feedback, and the feedback would always go, tell me one good thing that this group did, one positive. And so you get 5 or 6 students communicate that. And then if you're talking about ways of improving, I will always say to the students, this is not a personal attack, this is an opportunity for you to talk about how the group musically can develop, and students give feedback on, actually they need to work on the ending, or the rhythm needs not to be so loud, or whatever the feedback is. But I really work on trying to get students, particularly at middle school, to understand that their feedback advice is not to be a personal attack. It's about how could they make their work more effective, more musical. And again, that takes time and training from us, but the more we do that, the more efficient they are at really analysing what's going on and using those skills themselves. Always talking to my students, like, when you hear people play, you're going to hear wonderful ideas. Some of those ideas you might well include into your next work, and that's why we do this. So I hope those action points are helpful, and I hope this gives you some idea about communication. We all get it wrong at times, and we all have to keep learning better ways of communicating with our colleagues, with our friends, with our family, with our students. And anything we can do to help our students grow in this area is an amazing skill and gift we can, as music teachers, give our students, whether that's through musical expression or through verbal expression. Hope you've found this helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you to those who have already done that. It means so much. And I will see you again soon. I'm Rachel Hardman, and this is Passionate About Music Education.